Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen W. Long, and this is The Writing Life. My guest today is Shea MacLeod, and this girl's got it going on. She's quite a writer, and I'm so anxious to get into this, and thank you for showing up today and talking to us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. This is terrible for a host to say. I almost don't know where to start. But let's just jump in. You're so prolific, and I'm wondering, is this your full-time job or occupation or?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It has been since September of 2011 when I quit my job and
Really?
started writing full-time. Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't know the date. Is that significant?
It just kind of is.
Coincidental?
It's just, you know, the end of September. It was actually my mother's birthday, basically. Okay. And it was just like, to me, this is like kind of a big deal because I finally quit the job I hated to do what I always wanted to do.
Yeah. So 2011.
Yes.
This is 2017. Mm-hmm. That's a short time for how much you've produced.
Yeah. I write about probably between 6 to 8 books a year. Of varying lengths. Some are novellas, some are full-length novels.
Okay. Now, additionally, haven't you co-authored with somebody? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I co-authored with my friend Miranda Mayer.
Okay.
She's a local author too, lives up on Mount Hood.
Okay.
And we just enjoy each other's company, and we thought, why don't we try writing a book together? So we came up with this idea of sort of this supernatural, paranormal kind of detective story, if you will. And we wrote the book. She would write from one character's point of view, and I wrote from the other.
Now, I was going to ask you, do you alternate chapters or characters?
Yeah. We each chapter is one character's point of view, so it makes it really easy for us to just switch back and forth. Okay. Yeah.
And just from a technical standpoint, is that third person, first person?
First person.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that an author wants to do is be consistent with voice, and I bet you that helps.
It does,
yeah.
Especially when you have two people writing.
Sure.
And we have very different styles of writing, she and I. So by making it first person, it helped get us out of our own sort of individual styles, if you will.
Oh, really?
And let us be more consistent within the story. And then, of course, once we were done with the first draft, we went over and did rewrites together. We sat in a little coffee shop up in Sandy and just kind of went over it together and made what changes we wanted and whatnot before we sent it off to the editor.
Would you read to each other or just simultaneously?
We would simultaneously read through, and then if there was something that maybe we needed to talk about a little bit, we would read it out and then just kind of be like, well, do we want to handle it this way or this way, and have a little discussion if necessary.
I've never done that, and I have mixed feelings about that. It seems like on the one hand it'd be tough, but maybe fun too. It
was a lot of fun, and the key though is to have the right co-author.
Of course.
Because for me anyway, it's very hard to give up that creative control. And so having someone that you work well with and who understands your creative process and whose creative process is similar makes it a lot easier. And we actually we didn't find it difficult. We actually found it a great deal of fun, but I wouldn't do it with just anyone.
Well, sure. Yeah. I was thinking about creative process. Because you control your character, I mean, you have pretty much complete control of that. And then and I want to get into how you plot and write and so on.
Sure.
But for this kind of a thing, did you say to each other, that's the target, that's the ending, that's where we're going, now let's get there? Or did you just let it go and see where it took you?
I'm trying to remember. I think we pretty much had an ending in mind. We knew where we were going, and we would get together. We got together 2 or 3 times in person, and 2 or 3 times via Skype.
Really?
And and just kind of hashed out the plot, what we would do in each chapter, more or less.
Okay.
sometimes more, sometimes a lot less. And so then whoever was writing that chapter would write the chapter, send it to the other person. She would read it and then know where to go from there. And sometimes we'd overlap and do what the other person was supposed to do. But that was fine. It always worked out.
But you collaborated and that was fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So we were talking about being so productive. You've got, and these are my words, but the Sunwalker series,
Yes,
is that right?
Sunwalker Saga. Mm-hmm.
Sunwalker Saga, Dragon Wars, is that okay? And I read also that you do cozies.
I do.
Yeah.
Right there, we've got The Corpse in the Cabana. That's my
Okay.
first cozy mystery.
Okay.
When I was 12, I read my first Agatha Christie, and I knew that's what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Okay.
Not the killer. Well, sort of, in a way.
Sort of, yeah.
Manner of speaking. But yeah, I wanted to write those. And it took a little bit longer because I started with my paranormal romance, my urban fantasies. But yeah, I finally got brave and went for it. And
And there's more, right?
Yes, there's
Okay.
6 books in that series so far.
Again, you're just so prolific, and we'll talk about how you do that. Now, back to the other, urban fantasy, right? Now, is this, I don't know the definition of these. So, urban fantasy, paranormal romance, do those overlap? Are they completely separate?
They overlap a great deal.
Okay.
Paranormal, well, let's start with urban fantasy. Urban fantasy is a fantasy in an urban setting. It's as simple as that. Paranormal romance is a romance that has paranormal elements.
Okay.
The reason these overlap so well is because often when you read an urban fantasy, there are elements of romance. So the way to kind of define them is if you can take the paranormal out of the story and still have a story,
Okay.
it's a paranormal romance. If you could take the, wait, did I say that right? Yes. And if you take the romance out of the story and still have a story, it's an urban fantasy.
Okay.
I call mine both because mine you can't take either one out without
Okay.
losing the story. You have to have both.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is nitpicky, but I'm interested in this kind of stuff. So I know in science fiction, that's a genre. And then there's fantasy, which is different. And sometimes it's hard for me to tell which is which. When you say fantasy, is it that kind of thing? How would you define fantasy for your book?
For me, fantasy is less to do with technology and
Okay.
more to do with magic. So my world has what they call magic
Okay.
in it. It's a little bit more like quantum physics,
Okay.
a little bit, but it's basically magic. There's witches, there's dragons, there's genies, there's demons and vampires, and
Okay.
because why do one when you can do all
Oh,
of
yeah.
them? Whereas science fiction would tend more toward things like aliens, zombies,
Okay.
more to do with science and not magic.
Okay. I'm catching up to you. We're there. The other thing that I think I read, in fact, I think I read an excerpt. Your work can get a little. How can
yes.
I put this delicately?
There are sexy time scenes
Okay.
in some of my series.
Okay.
Some of them don't have any sex in them. The sex is off screen.
Okay.
This series, for instance, Sunwalker Saga, it definitely has a couple of sex scenes in it. It's a romance after all.
Okay. And again, being completely serious, I thought that not only is romance the #1 seller, right, as a genre,
Absolutely.
but I thought that there was no sex in romance. Obviously, I'm wrong about that because.
Oh yeah. You know what? There can be everything from no sex at all,
Okay.
like maybe a kiss if you're lucky,
Okay.
to like erotic,
Yeah.
explicit erotic content.
Okay. And that doesn't exclude you from that category.
Right. Now, I don't do what I would call explicit erotic content. I do more like, I mean, it's on-screen sex, but
Okay.
it's no different than you would find in most typical romance novels. It's pretty mild,
Okay.
really.
Okay.
I wouldn't let a child read it, but
Right.
most adults would enjoy it, I think.
Okay. So you've got, again, these categories, and I'm looking at 3 anyway. The Sunwalker Saga, Dragon Wars, and how do they differ? Or is it just a cast of characters, or are they really different approaches?
Yeah, well, these two are very different. Sunwalker Saga is told in first person. There's one character that is throughout, and it's an urban fantasy paranormal romance. Dragon Wars is set in the near future. It's post-apocalyptic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
okay,
there's a little bit, I guess it would almost be a little bit more science fiction than it would be
Fantasy.
paranormal.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
because there's no magic. There's no real magic. It's technology.
Okay.
And yes, there's romance in it as well. So, but
Good.
not every book has the same. Some books have the same characters. Some books have different characters.
Okay.
So.
And I think I understand a cozy. Do you want to just, if anybody doesn't know,
Sure.
define that?
Yeah, a cozy mystery is just that. It's supposed to give you a cozy feeling, despite the fact that somebody's lying dead on the floor.
Right.
There's no gratuitous violence. There's no on-screen sex, and there's little to no swearing.
Okay.
Like you might have what I call a poopaw word. Poopa's my grandfather.
Okay.
And he has certain words that he uses, but mild, very mild. Like you wouldn't drop F-bombs, for
Sure.
instance. So they're pretty clean, and you generally don't tackle really hardcore things. These are like small groups of characters. They tend to be in small towns or perhaps a village within a small town.
Right.
And you've got an amateur detective trying to solve this crime.
Again, just from a technical standpoint, does it need to be an amateur? And the reason that I ask that on like BBC or I see it on Acorn, Midsummer Murders.
Yes.
I would think that's a cozy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's, hard and fast rules are rarely hard and fast.
Okay.
And so while it's usually an amateur detective, it isn't always.
Doesn't
And
have to
Midsummer
be.
Murders is a perfect example of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what a segue. We're talking about Britain, and you spent some time in England.
I did. Yes, I
So
lived there 6 years.
Talk about that, and with your friend, I guess.
A friend of mine, oddly enough, I'm from Portland. I'm a native,
Okay.
born here. And she is also from Portland. And I moved there in 2006. She moved 2 years after I did. She's one of my best friends. So we spent a lot of time
Okay.
getting up to shenanigans in London.
Yeah. Now, was this for work or?
Actually, it was romance that took me to England.
Okay, all right.
And the romance didn't work out, but I started another love affair with the city of London. So I stayed.
Yeah.
And I loved every minute of it, and I still miss it every day.
Well, and I think that kind of experience informs probably what you're up to.
Yeah.
And
Yes, because actually I was living in London when I first published. So a lot of my, especially my earlier novels, have at least scenes that take place in London,
Right.
or they have characters that are from London, or things of that nature. So it's just colored everything that I am, that experience.
right. I actually wrote myself a note about your European research. Is that it?
No, I've been back
Okay.
for visits. Yeah, so I've been to Paris a few times. I've been to Italy. I went to Prague a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So yeah, I do other research besides. But
And are those settings then?
yes, I've set, I believe I definitely have one book set in Paris. I want to say there's a second one that has some scenes in Paris. I've set multiple books in London or other parts of England. In fact, the most recent cozy mystery that I wrote was set in the Cotswolds. I've set one book in Prague, and I haven't set anything in Italy yet, but give me time.
Time and a ticket. Well, that's going to be fun. Would that be a cozy then, you think?
I think probably that would be
Yeah.
a cozy, yeah.
Yeah.
But you never know. I mean,
I'm going to throw out a little phrase here. You can comment. Lacy knickers.
Lacey's a friend of mine. She's an author and a burlesque dancer, and I just love her to bits. She's
Yeah.
a great person.
Now, was there some kind of a convention or something? A bunch of people got together?
For burlesque.
For burlesque, okay.
Yes. Well, there was she put on a show, and I was one of the sponsors. I donated some books and whatnot.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And was that in England?
Oh, no, that's here.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
she puts on burlesque shows here in Portland.
It just sounds British to me. Lacey Knickers.
I know, Justin. Yeah. Well, she like we both belong to the Oregon Regency Society,
Okay.
which we like to dress up like it's 1815 and have picnics on the Pittock Mansion lawn, that sort of thing. And so I think probably there was a little bit of that in there because she's a little bit of an Anglophile. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that sounds fun. All right. So we talked about, again, you're so prolific. You talked a little bit about the length of your books. Is that a marketing? And what I mean by that is it easier to sell a book of that length, or is that what it takes to tell the story and then you move on?
It's a little of both. There's a certain sweet spot for lengths of novels, depending on genre.
Okay.
And there's a point at which making it longer doesn't necessarily serve either the story or your time spent writing the story. For me, most of the time, that's what it takes to tell the story. I don't block myself in where, I have to get X number of words.
Mm-hmm.
I have a word count that I prefer to at least reach. But if that's not the story, that's not the story.
Mm-hmm.
So I make the story however long or short it needs to be.
Yeah. And I think you said your readers are just gobble this up.
Oh, yeah.
Keep you hopping.
Yes. They'll read it. I've literally had someone buy it, read it in less than 24 hours, and then be emailing me wanting to know when the next one is out.
Right.
And I love that, but at the same time, it's like, oh my goodness, let me breathe for a minute.
So you've got the three genres or the three series that you're doing. Do you just pick to give yourself a break? And you know what I'm thinking of? I had the opportunity to talk with Ray Bradbury. Yeah, I mean, it was something. So he would write, maybe he's working on a novel in the morning and a play in the afternoon. He'd always have two things going, and his break would be to shift gears and do that other thing.
Yeah.
Do you work on things simultaneously? Do you finish one and then start the other? How do you do that?
I write simultaneously. I do exactly that. I have a program that tells me how many words a day I need to write in each project to reach a particular word count.
Really?
Yeah, to finish a book within a certain amount of time. So I will write I always have to write two totally different genres. I can't write in the same genre.
I can understand that. Yeah.
So
because would you then bleed over?
Yeah, because
John is in this one, and all of a sudden John shows up in this one.
It's more like the voice. I
Okay.
don't separate the voice. So like I'll write a cozy mystery and I'll write a Dragon Wars novel because those are so different that I don't get the voices confused.
Right.
But if I try to write two cozy mysteries at the same time, because I'm working on a new series that's set in 1932 London, and both of my cozy mystery series will be in first person. And so writing them at the same time is just not an option.
Right.
Because then I'll find Lady Rample starts sounding like Viola Roberts, and you don't want that to happen.
I think people who don't write, or don't write fiction maybe, they appreciate, even if it's intuitively, they appreciate voice in fiction, but they don't, but it's subconscious.
Yeah.
I don't know that they suss out, oh, that's what I enjoy about this, is the way she talks, or the vocabulary that the author has chosen. But it's there, and it's incumbent upon you to keep that straight and be consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes you'll see, I don't generally read my reviews, but once in a while someone will send me one that they've done because they've enjoyed my book. And easy and quick read are both keywords that they found the voice, that they enjoyed the voice. Because when a voice is easy, that makes it an easy, quick read for the reader. So that's kind of, yeah, exactly. I don't know that they're like honing in and going, yeah, that's the voice that I like.
Right.
But they instinctively know it.
There's a fellow that I know, T. Jefferson Parker, and I like his work. And it's kind of it's not a Sam Spade voice, but it is a kind of a clipped, tough guy voice. And I really like that when it's working. And I have to say, for me as a writer, I think when when you start something, you're kind of finding your way. And what grounds me is the voice. If I can hear it, I can write it.
Yeah.
And but sometimes it's like, I mean, the choices are just almost infinite. What level of vocabulary are you going to pick? So anyway, it's so important.
Very, yes.
All right. Next topic. You're going to do a workshop.
Yes.
Okay. Talk a little bit about that.
I'm going to be doing a workshop for the Washington County Writers Forum. It'll be August 3rd at, I think it's called Insomnia Coffee, something of that nature. But
Okay.
if you look them up on Facebook, you can find it. I'm going to be doing this Write Novels Fast. I put together this little book.
And again, this is your book.
This
You
is
wrote
my
this.
book. I wrote this book, and I do a workshop based on this book that just talks about my method of plotting a novel. And I've always been a pantser my whole life,
Right.
which for those who don't know what a pantser is
yeah.
someone who writes by the seat of their pants.
Right.
That wasn't working for me. I wasn't getting anywhere. It was taking years to write a book. So what I did after, doing a bit of research on what other people do, was come up with this method of using a journal, sort of an art journal,
Really?
to plot a novel. Yeah, so I started doing that, and that's how I came to write as many books a year as I do, because I'm plotting but not heavy detail. So I'm giving myself like this roadmap, or sort of like color inside the lines a little bit. I'm giving
Sure,
myself this
yeah.
sketch that I can fill in with detail. And I usually, the first part of the novel is information about my characters, images that I've taken. Maybe it's a celebrity, or...
Let me stop you. So you say the first part of your novel.
Oh, sorry. I mean my
Okay.
journal.
Okay. I was going to, because it could be.
Yeah.
You could be laying the groundwork, but I kind of
Yeah,
didn't
no,
think that's...
the plotting journal, the first chunk of it is about the character that's going to be in the novel. The main characters, secondary characters, and whatnot. It's background, it's world building, it's all that sort of thing. And then the rest of it is the plotting, well, probably, that's probably a third, then probably another third or so is the actual chapters, the plots for the chapters. And then the final bit is the information that I need for rewrites. So I make myself notes for the rewrites and the edits later on. So that's how I keep track of things. And I write that first draft. So I do that the journal within a couple of days, maybe a week at most.
Okay.
And then I start working on the novel, and I do that first draft, just a down and dirty draft. Some people call it draft 0. And I get that thing out as fast as I can. Usually
And when you do that, do you leave out description? It would be one thing. And so you're trying to get the plot down. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I just want to know you're going to rewrite this.
Yes.
So maybe you don't describe how gorgeous the sky is
Right.
and the sound of the birds and so
Right.
on.
I might put in some description,
Okay.
but for the most part, I don't worry too much about the description. I'm just
Okay.
trying to get out the plot. I'm trying to
Right.
get in the characters.
Which I think is terrific.
Yeah, and that's, so the sooner I can get that done, the sooner I can go back and polish the thing and expand it. I usually add anywhere from 10 to 20,000 words in a rewrite.
Okay.
So I add quite a bit to that.
Does it ever surprise you, or when you get to the end of the first draft, you're pretty solid? This is the story. This is what it's going to be, and then you just go back and.
It's usually pretty solid. I
Yeah.
mean, occasionally I will come up in the rewrite for, I believe it's the 4th book of the Cozy Mystery series. I came up with just the funniest scene actually on rewrites. And I
Okay.
was just cracking myself up writing.
Yeah, isn't that great?
Yeah, it was awesome because initially I just had Viola confront the killer, and then the police come, and that was it. Done. Very, very boring. But then I had this idea of why isn't there a car chase? But this is an 80-year-old woman, so it's a slow speed car chase through the streets of Astoria.
Okay.
And I could just see it so clearly in my mind, and I was just laughing the whole way through with Benny Hill music playing in
Sure.
my head. And yeah, so that came on rewrites. So sometimes when you do rewrites, these things will come and you'll find
Right.
ways to improve it. But you can't fix it till you get it on the screen to begin with.
God bless
So-
you. Yeah, I have said of myself, I'm not a spontaneous person in the sense of like performance art. And I think that the cool thing about writing is nobody has to see it until you're done.
Right.
So you can write it,
Yes.
and I'll back up a little bit. I think sometimes readers think, that author is so clever. Well, yes, but it's easy to put a clue in the first 20 pages and have that come to fruition at the last of the book when you've written the book and you go, you know what would be cool? And then you go
I
back.
need to put a clue here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
And-
absolutely.
And you can do that.
Yeah, that's the beauty of writing, and I think it happens a lot with new writers. I think that they need to have this perfect, beautiful,
Out of the box.
polished. Yeah, that's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
No.
Get that first draft. Who cares if it's rough, if the grammar's bad?
It's something you can fix.
Yes, you can fix that later.
Yeah.
You can make it pretty and beautiful and just how you want it later. But by trying to make that first draft perfect, all you're doing is slowing yourself down.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in a critique group, and one of the themes that you hear that we tell each other over and over is just write it. Stop fixing it. Get it down. Because if you write the first chapter 3 times or 6 times, if you ever do finish the book, you're going to change it anyway.
Yes, probably.
Just
Yeah.
get to the end, and
Right.
then you know what to fix.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you can't, if you don't know how it ends, or, I mean, even if you know how it ends, but if you haven't written that ending, you don't know. You might actually fix something in the beginning
Right.
that is actually going to screw up what you were going to write at
Absolutely.
the end. And you're going to write yourself into a corner.
Yeah.
And that's a headache.
John Irving says, for him, he said, the first thing he writes is the last sentence of the book. And he said, if you don't do that, it would be like coming into a restaurant and your friends are all sitting there. And if you announce to them, the funniest thing happened to me on the way here. If you said that without knowing what the funniest thing is, and so and I can't remember which book it is, but I heard an interview with him that he was working on a book at the time, and he said the last sentence of the book is this. Well, months later, I got the book and I read it, and that wasn't the last sentence, but it gave him direction.
Yes.
So that's one way to do it. Stephen King is the opposite. He says for him, writing is like archaeology. And you're walking along the path and you see something interesting, or you stumble on a rock and you dig it up, and you don't know what you're going to dig up. You might dig up a short story, you might dig up a novel. And so he kind of he's a, what would that be, pantser.
Definitely, yeah, he is definitely a pantser.
He works it out on the way. And I suppose I'm somewhere in the middle, and I think you're probably more of John Irving.
Now I am,
A little
but that's
bit.
only, I kind of train myself. I'm still a bit of a pantser because I still allow myself room within the story to move around. And I have been known to change my outline multiple times.
No, but I think
yeah.
that's the creativity.
Yes.
But I think you're right, too, that newer writers scare themselves
Yes.
because they're sitting there and they know it's not perfect, so they don't do anything.
Yeah.
And you can't do
And they
that.
sit there, and I've known writers who've literally said, "Oh, I just spent 2 hours on this sentence." What are you doing that for? You know, chances are you're not writing the great American novel. You know, and if you are, why don't you stick glass under your fingernails while you're at it?
There's a famous saying in writing, this morning I put in a comma. This afternoon I took it out.
See, and that's just like, I feel like you're torturing yourself.
Sure.
You're not having any fun. You really, I mean, if you're going to write a book, I think the key with a book. Now, this kind of goes two ways. On the one hand, when you're writing a book, if you're not having fun, your readers aren't going to be having fun.
Sure.
Now, the flip side of that is when you're a professional writer, there comes a point that even a book you love, you hate. You absolutely hate. And that usually comes somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
And because writing's work.
Sure.
I mean, that's the reality. Writing is work. And when you're doing it as a profession, it can be a slog at times. But you have to start the book. You know, it has to be a joy. There has to be fun. And if you're not having fun, why are you doing this? You know.
You know what? You're having fun. I know you are. Shea, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're out of time. That was just terrific. I just admire what you've done, and keep it up.
Thank you.
Keep it up. Keep traveling.
I will.
Okay. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I'm Stephen W. Long. You can join me at stephenwlong.com. Comments, send money, whatever you like. And we'll see you next time on The Writing Life. Thank you so much.
Thank you.